has Bake Off got a soggy bottom for good?
Someone came in here now and attacked us. Could you save my life?
Maybe.
Like, if Noel came and attacked you, could you, like, take him out?
I'd feel confident if it was Noel.
You could take Noel out, no problem.
You mean take me out to dinner?
With a few jiu-jitsu moves. What would we do?
You can't kill someone who's already dead.
Channel 4's The Great British Bake Off from Tuesday night. Scott, what's the story?
This is the 16th series of Bake Off. It is still Channel 4's most popular programme, which is quite a surprise, I think, because, you know, this is a show which has been a mainstay on TV for so long, of course, crossed over from the BBC about 8 years ago, and has been, against what a lot of people initially said about the show when it moved channels, still very popular for Channel 4. But I just sort of found that watching the most recent series, it feels very deja vu. It sort of feels as that there's been so many episodes now. It feels as if everything that can happen has happened on this programme, and it's a bit like watching Grand Designs in a way, in which every episode's the same. You know, I mean, on Grand Designs...
How dare you?
Well, no, but Kevin MacLeod turns up. There's a people who have more money than sense and more sense than money. Somebody gets pregnant. They all move to a caravan. The house is 4 years late.
Yeah, but they have different environmentally friendly tiles in each episode. It's completely different.
Eventually. But, you know, then Kevin MacLeod pontificates that it's the best house he's ever seen. And it's sort of the case on Bake Off, in which with the first series, it starts off with a Swiss roll. There's a baker that you think has been on the show before. There's a baker that everyone wants to have as a relative. There's a young baker that everyone thinks is too talented to be a baker at such a young age. And there's a male contestant that most of gay Twitter / Blue Sky immediately follow on Instagram within the first 5 minutes. And I think particularly around the sort of the technical challenge, I mean, it's been a bit abstract. It's been a bit of a sore point for me for quite a long time. But I mean, at the moment, it feels as if you're having a challenge that Prue Leaf has thought up in a dream, or something that you could purchase in Sainsbury's for a packet of 6 for about £1.75, which makes you wonder why spend 7 hours to go and do it. And everyone does it badly because they're not given any ingredients, any time, or any recipe. At the end of it, you know, they're all criticised, even though they had no idea what they were supposed to be doing in the first place. And it's been like this for ages now.
You have mixed feelings about Bake Off, I get it. But you are watching every episode, and you have brought it to us as your story of the week. So for people who aren't watching Bake Off, like, so what? Like, what's the implications of this for all of us?
British TV is at a very interesting moment, I think. I think it's been, fair to say, a pretty uninspired summer. I find it rather interesting that at a time in which the streaming revolution was offered to bring us so much choice and loads of new programmes, because of sort of a combination of factors, there's actually been relatively few new releases over the summer, including on streamers. And I think what's a surprise is that if you look back at summer, there's maybe What It Feels Like for a Girl was fantastic. There's a show called Alien and the Earth, which is great on Disney+. That's just about it. And it seems to be slimmer pickings for TV more than ever. And I just find it quite a surprise that when the Netflix and streamers came along, the whole idea was, you know, it was going to revolutionise the way that we watch TV, and it has. But by and large, I think actually we've got just about the same amount of new shows a week as we had 10, 15 years ago. And it's like we're basically paying as much as we did before. We've ended up being back in square one again. It feels like we've done a complete circle. And now you're having shows like Bake Off, which is, you know, I will watch for the rest of time, and I do like, because everyone else is watching it. But it's the 16th series, so it's surprising sometimes, I find, about the lack of new big shows that are on.
Kat, isn't it just the case that for the very reason Scott said, you know, there's so much on the streamers, that's where we tend to go now for our big quality dramas and stuff. That's kind of what TV has become. TV has become comfort, nostalgia, predictability, formats, something you can watch with the whole family. Not surprising.
I have never felt older in my life than one of my friend's kids referred to a TV programme saying that it was extremely clever that the people behind this TV programme had done what he called a delayed drop. And I had to think about that for a minute. And what I realised he meant was an episode a week. And I had to explain to this young man that that is, in fact, how we all used to watch our television. But I'm pretty controversial in that I don't really enjoy reality television, and that is a me problem. It's not a television problem. But what television's problem is struggling to keep up with the streamers. It's struggling to come up with content that is going to hook young people in the way that they just want short, sharp programs. Their brains are being reprogrammed by TikTok to only want little bite-sized chunks of television. And that obviously is having a huge knock-on effect on broadcasters. I mean, Channel 4 is relentlessly under threat. The Conservatives wanted to privatise it. There was a public consultation about that. It managed to escape from that at the 11th hour. Last year, when Lisa Nandy took over as the new culture minister, she met with Tim Davie from the BBC, which obviously is also trying to battle with allegations of irrelevancy, trying to work out how it should be funded when there is such a vast drop in people taking out licence fees. And one of the suggestions was the BBC and Channel 4 merge. And I read somebody at the time saying, it doesn't really matter who's sitting in what chair. They're all producing the same output. But of course, Channel 4 has a distinct identity. It was created to have a distinct identity. And who is sitting in what chair absolutely does matter. And there has to be a way of reinvigorating enough television that we can keep these broadcasters healthy and strong, because they are so vital as a part of British society.
So this is the thing, isn't it, Jamie? You have this titanic hit in the form of Bake Off, which does bring a lot of Britain together. But at the same time, it's now on a channel whose remit is to spend money on things that are distinctive and original and actually sort of by their nature a bit more divisive than Bake Off. Channel 4's found itself in a bind where it says to the government, look, you wouldn't want to privatise us because look at all we do. And then the biggest thing it does is something that absolutely every private television company would love to have on its books, a big formatted programme like Bake Off.
Yeah, and I think I've read a lot of interviews with people in TV, and obviously Scott will know a lot more about this, but it does feel like for a while at least, Channel 4 was prioritising things that it knew were hits, things like Gogglebox, things like Bake Off, things that were actually fairly cheap to make, I guess, in lots of ways. Reality TV like 24 Hours in Police Custody, which I love, or programmes like that are kind of guaranteed hits. I mean, it was founded in 1982. The remit was to be different, young and experimental. And I've heard lots of things said about Bake Off, but I don't think those three words could be used to describe it. But when I think about some of the hits that have, even recently, I mean, how long ago is this? But like things like It's a Sin, Derry Girls, or like Big Boys, these are like really great, interesting TV shows that have been put on Channel 4. So, I mean, there is still some market there for what, we would suggest that it was brought into operation in order to do. I guess the kind of question is how risk-taking or risk-averse Channel 4 will be, as Kat was rightly saying, it is feeling pressure from the government and from outside sources.
And also one of the things they do, Scott, when they're put under pressure to defend, have you done anything risky and original, is they point towards programming which, whilst risky and original, is also incredibly sexualised and upsets people for that reason.
Channel 4 has always been provocative. I think the issue the channel has had is that there were really difficult circumstances for the channel sort of 2-3 years ago. Because of the loss of consumer confidence, there was a massive drop in advertising and new commissions on Channel 4, but also with a lot of commercial channels ground to a halt. And if you think about it, at a time when you're literally having very little money coming in, why would you risk on a big new format that could be a loss when also shows don't tend to be successfully financially in the short term anyway? And I think a challenge Channel 4 has faced is that if you look at the schedule now compared to, let's say, 10 years ago, the most popular programmes are on there are shows either from other channels like Taskmaster or Gogglebox. It is very hard to get a new successful show on there. I think what they have done in the last year, particularly in the last 6 months, they've done a lot of flashy events where they've said, look, we've got the money now, look, we can commission you now, look, we're trying to do things that other channels are doing. And it has varying degrees of success. I think on Sunday, I'm not sure whether you saw the quite delightfully camp show The Inheritance starring Elizabeth Hurley and Rob Rinder. But it's basically like a mixture between The Apprentice and The Traitors, made by Studio Lambert, who make The Traitors. And it's trying to be a bit kind of a new format, new IP. It's something made in the UK, as in it's not an international format. But so far, the audience figures have been quite lackluster. I mean, it's not picked up momentum as much as it would do. And I think it just shows that these days when it's so competitive, it's so hard to launch a new show and make it land, because you haven't got the people now, particularly young people, who sit down at 9 p.m. and turn on a TV channel. They're all on streaming, or they're all flicking between different places. It's harder to get an audience to join a show if they're not necessarily there in the first place.
And just to return to the point I was making about sexuality, though, that's the other thing, isn't it? A lot of the ways they are provocative, as you say, and cut through is things like the Bonnie Blue documentary they made recently and Virgin Island. Is that a problem long term for them, though, that then people think of Channel 4 as, I suppose, a bit filthy, rather than a channel that, objectively looks at important issues rotating around people's sexuality?
I just don't think that's necessarily new with Channel 4. I mean, Channel 4 10 years ago did a show called Sex Box, where they put people in a box and they had sex. I mean, I sort of think that yes, you can look at a show name and be like, oh, Virgin Island, they put virgins on an island. Isn't that a little bit crass? But I mean, actually, I wouldn't say it's a faultless show, but it was interesting that it was made by their factual entertainment team rather than their entertainment team. So it actually was quite educational. And it highlighted that because of COVID, there's a generation of young people who just didn't go on first dates, didn't go to nightclubs, didn't leave the family nest until a lot later, haven't been going out drinking as much and meeting other people because of the rising cost of living, and also the decline in use in alcohol with young people. So all of that has a cumulative effect, plus poor sex education. So it tapped into these issues. Yes, there is always the line about whether it's exploitative, but I think Channel 4 can be a bit savvy. And it's the same case with, and I know this is not necessarily a late night sexual program, but some of the documentary strands are very thoughtful, like Educating Yorkshire. Just came back this week. Their first episode was all about neurodiversity and the rise of ADHD. People having ADHD assessments. You just don't see that anywhere else. So yes, some shows can be crass, some shows can be filthy and ridiculous, but it's Channel 4. What else are you going to do?
Well, I suppose the problem maybe that it hints at, Jamie, is that they have to pursue those advertising dollars, as we were saying, and that's a strange thing for a public service broadcaster, isn't it? I know that's how it works in places like Australia, but here when you have the BBC with no ads, it's weird then to have a channel that gets public money but also has to use advertising. So you have to go for this kind of clickbait stuff.
Yeah, and I think I actually think that the dual income or process is actually sometimes quite hamstringing the Channel 4. And I think it speaks to a kind of wider question about what we want public service broadcasting to look like in the UK. There's often loads of discussions around the BBC and the future of the BBC, and with YouTube and TikTok and on demand, what space does it hold? But I kind of think ultimately what we want is shared cultural spaces, and about what is British identity apart from sharing the things that we enjoy. And I wondered, to go back to Bake Off, whether it's actually a kind of victim of its own success, really. When it came in, it was such a incredible programming that literally everyone watched. And now I would be interested to hear other people's thoughts on this, but a lot of TV shows are kind of the same. Like MasterChef is the same every year. People don't seem to have a problem so much with that, but it seems like Bake Off, because of how important it was to the kind of national identity when it came through, I wonder if it's a victim of its own success in that way.
Kat, what do you watch as comfort telly? It can't just all be thoughtful documentaries.
I'm going to be even more controversial and say that I'm not particularly into documentaries either. Though I absolutely shouldn't say that, because I have a documentary of my own coming out on Sunday. Not on Channel 4, however. I watch junk. I watch absolute dire junk television, and I'm not going to reveal any of my favourites because nobody would respect me ever again. But I think...
Are they set on ships?
Some of them are set on ships. Many of them are set in hospitals. I love a medical drama. Big fan of The X-Files. Would watch that on repeat until the end of my life.
That's not junk by modern standards. There are shows now where people go dating naked.
Well, indeed. And I think the dating naked thing is part of Channel 4's problem, because it does have a bit of a branding issue, in that I think your average person would think that Channel 4 was aimed exclusively at a younger audience and a bit more of a lightweight audience, given the amount of sex sells content. But actually, some of its documentaries are extremely heavyweight. They have done really excellent work on the national grooming scandal. They were out ahead of the Russell Brand story. They do really high quality public service journalism. And I think that can get overlooked. I think Channel 4 News is one of the best quality news services that we have. Some of their journalists are the finest that are operating in the UK, and they tell stories in really creative ways that I find really engaging, that I prefer to the BBC. With Bake Off, I like the fact that Bake Off is repetitive. I like the comfort of it. I think when something's been running for that long, it can be a bit difficult to get publicity for it. I think the scandal this year was that there's nobody aged over 60 taking part, and there was a bit of a brouhaha at the suggestion that old folk don't have the stamina to keep baking every week, which seems like a nonsense. You know, you're not scaling Everest, you're whipping up some French fancies. But I like that. I like the repetitive nature of it, and I wouldn't get too upset by that. But I think Channel 4 has to work out what its messaging is one of its issues.
Scott, what do you think the future of Channel 4 is going to be? I mean, you know, it seems safe at the moment in terms of its status as a public service broadcaster, but people are talking about a possible Reform UK government in the next decade, and the arguments for why it should be privatised, they're still there.
Yeah, they are still there, but I think the heat has gone away, at least for the time being. I think it's more of an existential threat in regards to general audiences and where they're heading next, really. I think you've only had to look at the rise of YouTube as a platform. It's now overtaken ITV as the most sort of popular media form of consumption, not just with young people, but with older people too, primarily through a TV set. And as a result, ITV and Channel 4 have started to put their entire programme back catalogue onto YouTube for younger viewers to watch. But I think, you know, there is a real relevancy issue. I think Channel 4 does have a future if it really targets its programmes well. But it used to be the case 10 years ago that you could fund a programme with the likes of a international streamer. Now streamers are just poaching talent. Lisa McGee behind Dairy Girls, you know, the best sort of sitcom of the last 10 years. Her next project is with Netflix. And it was originally going to be with Channel 4 too, but Channel 4 are no longer working alongside that. And I think that just shows an issue with talent. You know, you can have a show that isn't yours, you don't own it because you have to give it away, but that can become a massive hit internationally in days compared to Channel 4, which can be a big success but takes so much longer.